What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Marketing Desk. I'm your host, Tyler Fleischer. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Jay, CMO at Eco. Jay, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good. Thanks, Tyler. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so I'm excited for a conversation. We're going to talk about your work at Eco and kind of the whole stablecoin narrative that's going on in crypto right now and how the challenges of marketing in the space are currently evolving. So to start off, would love for you to just kind of get into, for someone who doesn't know what Eco is, what do you guys do, and briefly describe what programmable money is and why that matters.
We're building infrastructure for stablecoins and then making them easier to use and more useful is kind of the most simple way to put it. Obviously, there's a little bit more complexity to that, but I would say that's kind of like the ELI5 pitch. Now, if I go a layer deeper to probably people that might be listening, it's an orchestration network that enables stablecoins to become programmable, and it can take stablecoins anywhere effectively. So one customer of ours is LeFi. They use Eco for their stablecoin pairs cross-chain, and they're able to provide liquidity as fast as possible, as cheap as possible, because our network is integrated. And so they're more of an aggregator, and so that makes most sense. I would say we also have kind of prospective customers that we're working with, or I guess kind of current customers, but they're just not live yet, focused more on a variety of different use cases. But at the end of the day, everything that underpins their needs and their problem statements, or what addresses their problem statements, relate to how do I get stablecoins as fast as possible within this application. And then I think you asked like why programmability is important, I think, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I think why that's important right now is, and it's been important for a while, is it's just the way the industry is trending is the way the world is trending. And when I say that, I mean more of the problem statement. So if you think about traditional Rails' major problem comparatively to crypto Rails was that it's slower, not as cheap or not as cost efficient, and also has maybe challenges when it comes to accounting and bookkeeping because you now have intermediaries. It's not necessarily a single source of truth. There's multiple sources of truth. And that is why blockchain kind of came in. And that was the thing that grew out the industry back when Bitcoin started and the subsequent chains started too. And then, of course, more when stablecoins launched shortly after. And so that was like the biggest challenge was performance and just reliability. We're not well past that, but I think the industry is trending to be past that. And I think everybody's wet. So that's kind of the inevitability that we've been seeing since stablecoins were live. And that's what we're seeing now. We'll probably see that continue on more and more. And I think that's kind of the obvious point that almost everybody who's been working in crypto for a little bit or even a lot is more the obvious point, but they're seeing that. Now, I think the next phase is what happens once we solve that performance issue? What happens once we solve those issues that I outlined before with some of the traditional Rails? Well, realistically, we're going to want to do something a little bit more complex with those things. And that's what the traditional Rails did as well, but they kind of just had a lot of patchwork to enable that. So programmability technically exists in some form in traditional Rails. It's just manual and very arduous to kind of go through. So a good example is compliance. Compliance isn't just baked into one protocol in traditional Rails. You probably have a stack or like an API connected to it. There's like checks involved. There's also a lot of points of failure in that flow, like I've kind of continued to press on. And so if it would be really cool if we just had one infrastructure where all of this automation and programmability could be baked in, and compliance is just one example, but there's other things like if this, then that statements. That's like a most basic example, and there's probably much more than that. And so if you just eliminate all of the need to that and kind of codify the rules, well, then it'll just work more efficiently, and the scale is much more immediate in front of you as a application builder, a product builder, as a financial services team, for example.
Yeah, great context. I appreciate that. So you came in as CMO at Eco in 2024, in June of 2024, so basically 2 years ago.
hmm
Give me the quick pitch on what drew you into that role and how big the team is at Eco and how big the marketing team is.
Yes. I would say the answer probably ties into my entire background. So I'll kind of quickly touch on like high points there. But effectively, I've been working in crypto since 2015. I ran an agency at Ogilvy and Mather, one of the biggest agencies in the world. The thing that was great about that is I was able to get a lot of experience, and a lot of different types of clients came through the door. That was also conveniently during like kind of the beginnings of the ICO kind of movement.
Mhm.
And so it got really manic at one point, I would say, like for better or for worse. And in any case, long story short, it was an incredible experience, but I just wanted to be in the belly of the beast. I just wanted to be a part of the team. I had a kind of startup origin when I was in music before that. So I just wanted to see what that looked like. I worked at a DEX called Aeroswap, one of the earliest DEXs in the space. And that was like an application. And that was kind of one of the key players, I suppose, of the DeFi movement in early days. We
Mhm.
got acquired by Consensus, and it actually ended up getting absorbed into the MetaMask team. And so the MetaMask swaps product is actually our product, just like morphed a million times now, which is really cool to see.
Yeah.
Now, after that, it was actually COVID, Goon, and a few of the other execs, John Woo included, like they reached out to me and they said, hey, you ran marketing for this DEX. You clearly know crypto products pretty well. You clearly know how to market at least startups. Do you want to also lead marketing for Avalanche? At that moment in time, it was not that obvious that Avalanche would get to the point that it got to today. So I was pretty reserved about the decision, but I remembered thinking, well, I do see a lot of problems with Ethereum, even though I'm still a big fan of the project and just the movement in general, because that's just kind of how I started. But I remember running the decks, or at least being on the team that ran the decks, and every other day it was, oh, the DEX isn't working, but not because the DEX is bad, it's because the network is bad. And that to me felt so frustrating. So I was thinking, okay, well, this might be a viable solution to address that. And so I ended up joining Avalanche, led the team, was there for 4 years, but that's like layer one infrastructure, like really
Mhm.
almost at the very bottom. So you now have like the application layer, then you have the infrastructure layer. And then I was thinking to myself, well, what's that next challenge? What does that look like? So kind of more pertinent to my experience. I was like, I don't know if I want to do another application this soon back to back, unless there's like something killer that popped up. And I think there were some killer ones, to be honest, but I think I just missed the boat on that. So that's just my own timing. I also didn't want to do infrastructure from an L1, L2 perspective for a lot of reasons, but I think the main point that I saw was when Avalanche joined, we had, dozens of L1s, L2s. By the time my tenure at Avalanche was over, we had hundreds of L1s, L2s. Fact of the matter is, I don't know if I had the edge. So it wasn't even like the market was kind of, maybe the market was intimidating. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say. But in any
Yeah.
case, I didn't want to do it back to back either, is kind of the real answer. But there's a lot of different things that kind of pointed to that. And so now you have this like compressed view where it's like applications are kind of out of my view, infrastructures are out of my view, or at least blockchain infrastructure is out of my view. What's in front of me? Well, I knew I wanted something multi-chain because as much as I loved Avalanche, if you I always joked if you tweeted about Solana, it was not a good day for an Avalanche employee, right? Like if you tweeted about Ethereum, it was not a good day. And I
Yeah.
think that's true with anyone in the industry. It's not just Avalanche pertinent. The second piece was multi-chain just felt more like safe. Multi-chain wasn't a narrative when I joined Avalanche as much, but now it's like pretty easy to deploy across chain, so that makes sense. Then the third thing I actually leaned back to on the Avalanche point was infrastructure was the most interesting because most people are bored by that, but also maybe very confused by it because it's pretty complex. But I tend to find that because you're probably the same way too. We're in the industry pretty deeply. You understand it better, and you understand how important infrastructure is.
Mhm.
All the flashy, shiny things on top cannot exist if the infra isn't good. And so I kind of looked left and right. And stablecoins, I kind of consider infrastructure to some degree. Wallets, I also consider as infrastructure. And then the other was like things like not necessarily these categories, but things like oracles, like data feeds, things like that. I thought were interesting too. So that was like where my view was. Just so happened that stablecoins was getting hot and hot. And so I think a lot of the deals that came through my desk for opportunities with stablecoins, and Eco had a really interesting solution where they were saying, hey, we want to actually be the infrastructure to make it easier to use stablecoins. That was kind of the first tenet of our go to market, not issue, not deal with any of that stuff. And so I kind of found that to be yeah, interesting enough at the time. And I also knew that my background could kind of like culminate into having actually that edge because I not only know blockchain infrastructure, but I also know application. And so now it's like, well, what else is left? It's probably stablecoin, some asset, or like something like wallets. And then that's kind of where I landed. In hindsight, kind of look like a genius now, but I would
Yeah.
say that was like the thinking early on without kind of the market signals that we see today.
Yeah. And how big is the eco team and how big is the marketing team?
Right. Eco team's just under 30, I think, like 25, 30.
Mhm.
Marketing team is myself. We have like a support right under me and two creatives. So one is like static and the other is more like video and more dynamic creative.
Awesome. So Eco was founded in 2018. You came in as CMO in 2024. Was there much marketing before you? And kind of when you started, what did you find out? What was under the hood once you jumped in? Um, there was I'm sure there were a ton of challenges that you had to strategize and prioritize and figure out how to build the brand and how to grow from a marketing perspective. Can you share some thoughts and details on kind of like what was the immediate shock once you started?
There was certainly marketing, and there was actually a lot of it.
Right.
There was a lot of different types of things. There were promotional campaigns, affiliate campaigns. There were campaigns around the product. So they were building a fintech app, basically like a fintech crypto app, which is now very popular now. But Eco was building it since 2018, and so it's very much more like a retail consumer angle, I would say. And then they also then spun up a wallet that was trying to be like an on-chain Venmo type product, and it ended up being more of a demo product that then preceded what we have today. So the infrastructure kind of comes out of that. So it's called Bend, and then we kind of like ripped out the infrastructure, and that's what we've been building since that time. I think the shock more wasn't really there because luckily I knew about Eco, and I'm usually not too jarred by most things. Like in crypto, you've probably seen every single possible thing that shocks most marketers. I think for me, the way I like to address a problem, whether you're a brand new company or a company that's pivoted or one that is maybe doing well and it's just like a change of the keys where maybe there's a different leader that was before and I'm kind of the one that's coming in, is just really reset everything. Like I know I have conviction on some of the ways I've been running things, and I have a brand marketing background first and foremost. And so naturally I'm going to start with that. What's the messaging? What's the brand strategy? Is it good enough? And then most importantly, on the other side, is the product good enough to hold that brand promise and brand strategy? And so usually, knock on wood, but I typically don't join companies that don't have that product strength because it's like, well, how can marketing really save the day? It can't. It can only do that for the short term until you're going to run into some serious problems. And so I think the shock value was more that when I was at Avalanche, my team was almost as big as 50 people at one point.
Yeah.
And I think we like tabled out at like 30 or something, or 30 or 40. I can't really remember exactly what the headcount. And when I say 50, it wasn't like 50 marketing strategists. It was like community managers and things like that and DevRel. So I count those as well. But I think the shock was just like going back to full execution and also full strategy, or like strategy was always there, but like adding those two together.
Right.
Now, luckily, I usually don't shy away from that. Like outside of Eco and outside of other things I do outside of crypto, I'm executing a lot. And I actually find a lot of enjoyment out of this. So ultimately, what I loved about Eco was I just saw this as a challenge. Like most people see the resume and they go, well, I don't think this guy's going to survive. Like he had a big team, he had the resources, the rocket ship of Avalanche. That to me is just fueling the fire. I'm just saying, hey, I can prove you wrong. I'm going to try and do my best to overcome that. And so, you can kind of cut this in different ways, but my view is if you can be a fully T-shaped operator in this day and age, in startups at least, you can do anything. And you can really scale the team really well. You can be at the beginning, middle, and end, I believe. Maybe end's a little bit harder, but I think that's just numbers at the end of the day in terms of like headcount. It just keeps growing. So after a certain point, I think it becomes pretty manageable. But I think just staying on your toes. And so even, I'm sure we'll touch on this a little bit in this conversation, but I've just gone so deep in Claude flows.
Yeah.
And I know that's kind of a meme these days, but I really have. And for me, like, it feels like I'm a teenager again when I first discovered like how the internet really can do more for me. And that to me is just the nerdiness that I have inside that I think keeps me driving as an operator. So I know that's not necessarily like the direct answer, but I do think that was kind of like the biggest thing, shock value, and really how to like rally around that and really how to like scale everybody up as best as possible, especially in knowing that I wasn't going to scale the headcount like that drastically even in like the next few years.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a great answer. And it segues into the next point that I want to talk about, which is like your day to day. You're a strategist, but you're also an operator. So thinking about the balance between those two, I have a lot of similar background in my experience where leading small teams or even being an individual contributor where you're really trying to strategize and execute every single day at the same time. So given that perspective, where does your time go each day, each week? What are you focused on? You said you come from like a brand background. So is it more a lot of brand work and content and thought leadership work that is really taking up most of your time? Or are you also working on like developer relations or partner marketing or stuff like that? Where's your time going right now?
Yeah, so I come from a brand background more formally from the agency world, but before that, when I was in music, I started my own music publication, and I basically taught myself basics of digital marketing. It was like
Mhm.
early social media, it was like digital, like broadly, so that included probably like website, SEO, and like programmatic ads, like a little bit, and like
Mhm.
just like touching things basically, right? And then throughout my time in crypto, I've gone very deep in a lot of those things, almost all of them. And I've learned a lot from the peers that I worked with and also the people that I hired for my team and all those things. And so now I think brand is very important, but that's like the thing that always keeps the house, that people say the roof, right? Like or like the core of the house. That just keeps it standing.
Mhm.
And so brand, I think I've over indexed on the day to day in the first 2 months. Like with AI now, it's probably 1 month, but like back in the day, it was like 2, 3 months realistically, just to get the brand strategy, push that out to the channels that are relevant, test it, iterate it, and then make sure that the product is aligned to that brand strategy. Now, or at least right after that, which is like, after the first quarter, then it's more like, let's stand up the marketing capability. Let's see if we can start to run a Twitter strategy that is scalable, meaning like it's not just like one post occasionally. It's like let's do like 3 posts every other day or something like that. And not
Mhm.
only posting, but then also, of course, generating results. And then I move on to the next thing, which is like search. What can we do with search? Well, maybe we can do the basic, optimizing the website. Let's make sure that all the LLM robots are able to scrape it. Let's do all the housekeeping before then we go, okay, well, maybe we have to do a holistic alignment with the brand strategy, like the kind of core infrastructure to then drive the copy that's on the website. Then we move on to the next thing as the basics are stood up, right? And then it's like, okay, last example would be, all right, well, let's do thought leadership because now we don't have ways to generate the upper and middle funnel for the product funnel. And so we need to like establish credibility. We need to establish trust. And so the classic plate spinning analogy, that's just all I'm doing. And I'm just moving around and around and around and around. And I just keep going around and around every time. And so I've been doing that since I joined basically. And now the channel list is like much broader. We have, Reddit, we have like AEO, like AI optimization. We have events. We have Giphy. Actually, that's one strategy we ran for a little bit, which worked really well. And so we just keep adding it on. And you basically ask, well, how did the channels stay or go? And it's effectively just, well, is it working? Am I driving results? If I'm not driving results, there's no point in doing it. And measurement is so key. And I know that sounds obvious, but I find that a lot of people and startups forget measurement because the house is on fire half the time. And so they don't like take a second to breathe and then set up the documentation, set up the measurement capabilities. So then you can actually figure out if something's working or not instead of just guessing. And I think that's really how my day to day works. And today, because I have Rob, who's just under me, and he's basically focused on socials for the most part, like Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube, more or less. Like he's doing a lot more than that, but that's just kind of his like main focus day to day. Now I can take my eye off that ball, and now I can focus on other things that I have more of an edge in. And so I've been really, really deep in search and really deep in AI optimization for the last 6 months, but also even the last year or so. And now I've like automated it, most of it, using Claude and some of the skills that I've built. And so instead of it taking, even like sometimes it would take hours of my day, now it takes 10, 20, 30 minutes, and then I can move on to the next thing. And so now that I have bandwidth, actually what I've looked to is email. Email is the thing that's at the bottom of the list, but it was spinning fast enough where I was like, okay, it's fine. But now it's like, I had a basic like monthly newsletter that just basically aggregated all the updates. That's very, very basic. And
Mhm.
that's not necessarily going to like crush your email strategy. So I've now gone in and re-educated myself on email. I don't actually have a formal email background, though I've run many email campaigns throughout my career, but I never really like specialized in it. And so staying humble, learning about it, I've just binged YouTube, basically on how to understand how like what the best practice for email is. And then I think like by the next week or so, I'll be able to implement some of those ideas. And then hopefully that plate effectively spins faster.
Yeah. How do you set up that measurement process and I guess that attribution process? When you speak about it, it sounds like a no-brainer. Every marketer is like, yeah, we have to, if we can't measure it, it's like what we don't, what's that old adage? If you can't measure it,
Yeah.
is it even performing or something like that,
Right.
right? Like we talk about it, but it's more complex than a lot of people make it or understand it to be. How do you set up that whole
Yes.
measurement process across channels to really give you those insights that make you know what's working and what's not working?
Right. So the attribution comment I think sometimes gets conflated in like standing up your measurement. So and like those two, it's like, okay, well, I can't get full attribution, so I can't even measure. It's like that's not really true. I think
Mhm,
where the attribution came from, I heard it more in the agency days, which was if an agency is doing some like brand marketing or like brand lift campaign or something like that, the criticism was like, well, how do you prove that this has value? And that's more of like a non-marketer speak I sometimes find.
mhm,
Like there is value in brand
yeah,
visibility, but to measure the brand lift is like really hard because you have to use like an NPS score or something, which is a little bit hand wavy. And so I think people look at that and they're like, out of home, does that even drive value? It's like, well, if you did it smart, it could. You could have like a QR code with tracking. You could have a landing page with pixel tracking, and you now have attribution. But if you just do a billboard with text, like, yeah, of course, like you're just gonna have to estimate based on what the vendor tells you how many eyeballs have seen that and just take your
yeah,
best guess, right? So when it comes to standing it up, well, we often forget that every single channel that I've named when you asked before has a native measurement capability, first and
mhm,
foremost. Now, I think what happens is most people look at this dashboard and get completely overwhelmed because typically marketing operators and startups aren't coming from an analytics background. They're not like analytics people that then become like marketing leads or like marketing specialists or something. I mean, of course they could exist, but I don't think that's just the classic flow. So what I do is I actually just simplify things. Focus on one thing you want to measure. If you're starting up the brand in like your first 6 months of the company or the 6 months of the pivot or whatever you want to call it, well, you're probably not optimizing for conversions of the product realistically. You're probably not even optimizing for engagement because you don't even know if you can get engagement because you have probably 10 followers. So guess what? Like, let's just go to what you're actually doing, which is brand strategy or brand marketing, and just focus on the impressions, focus on the upper funnel stuff just for something. Measure that over and over and don't measure anything else. Eventually, you're going to get to a point where you're going to start to see impression growth and it goes from 1,000 to 10,000 to maybe even 100,000 in a month. Then start to add the other stats because then, then maybe you get 10 clicks, 15 clicks, 20 clicks. And it's just a spreadsheet. It's like the most basic thing. I have a spreadsheet with 4 columns, and I have Twitter with 4 columns, LinkedIn with 4 columns. I have website search, all the other channels, and it's just like a 7 tab, 8 tab spreadsheet. And that's how I started, legitimately. And then I just put some basic percentage calculations and averages, and then I started to do quarter after quarter. Because like I think what happens sometimes is people measure too, and then they go, okay, well last week wasn't as good as next week, and next week wasn't as good as the third week and the fourth week. It's like that's like losing weight or like gaining weight. It's like sometimes you're going to have off days, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're not taking progress. And especially with startups so volatile, just take a longer time horizon, 1 month minimum, or even a quarter. And once you're starting to see the trends, like our stats are saying we were up quarter after quarter, more or less since we started this. And then last month, I was looking at it and I said, now I think the spreadsheet is probably like we've outgrown the spreadsheet. So I was just trying to figure out how to manage that. And usually at my old bigger companies, when I was at Ogilvy, for example, we would use Tableau and
mhm,
actually Aeroswap and Avalanche we use Tableau too. But we would use Tableau. Now Tableau requires a hire to actually implement that, and I don't have the skills to do that well. I could do it somewhat well, but not really that well. So it's just not worth it, and I'd probably focus on it too long. But luckily today we have Claude, and so I basically asked it. I was like, "Hey, can you build me a Tableau dashboard?" And it kind of figured it out, and I built that.
yeah,
And now I have really specific prompts, and now it's less about like this linear view of all the monthly and quarterly data points, but now it tells us insights, and now it tells us what you asked in the initial part of the question, which is I've had it build the whole funnel, and I now ask it, where are we getting drop off? Where are we strong? Where are we not? And one of the, I'm paraphrasing, but one of the things for our X strategy, it was like, your upper to middle funnel strategy for X is really good, but your product level conversion, it's not that it's bad, but you're not like posting that much on it, or you're posting much less, or they're just not doing as well post by post. And so that indicated to me, I'm like, that makes total sense. I knew that, but I didn't really know that until someone told me.
Mhm.
Now I went back to the team and I'm like, all right, let's fix this. I think it's an easy fix. Let's actually push more. Let's be much more intentional. Let's watch the stats. And if they're low, then we got to change something about how we're messaging it, because it's clearly not converting. And we can actually diagnose the problem much more granularly. And just like the plate analogy, we're just going to keep going around and around until we have the full stack. And at the very bottom, we have, conversion at this point, which is like download the repo, or star the repo, or even like deploy and go through our sales cycle. And then eventually we're going to just want to keep tightening that up. And then if we're not getting sales after I run a full funnel marketing campaign, well, there's clearly something wrong in how we're running that campaign, right? And so that's kind of how I think iteratively on like, where are the things that are going right? Where are the gaps? How can we fix that? And then how can we level that up to the next phase? And then that's the circular, hopefully growth minded flow that we are doing.
Yeah. And who is Eco's like core customers? Who are you marketing to? Are you segmenting all these channels for each audience? And how do you think about that, as that just probably adds more complexity to the full marketing motion?
Yeah, so I would say our target customer is still something that we're discovering more granularly, but broadly speaking, it's B2B. So
Mhm.
B2B is where we started. Kind of going back to the earlier question, it's like the way we focus on is just take the best guess. Anyone in the industry could probably tell you what channels are more leaning B2B. LinkedIn is certainly one of them. And so let's just go there and let's just start testing the narrative and doing a little bit more LinkedIn leaning. And that was like when I first joined. Now we're much more mature, where we still don't know exactly who our like ideal customer profile is, but we know directionally who it is. It's people who are at crypto companies, who are probably leaning more technical, who are probably in BD. But most importantly, it's also more on the other side, which is like the large enterprises, the large fintechs, or maybe not large, but just fintechs in general, and people that might need, or companies that might need stablecoin liquidity.
Mhm.
And so, of course, we can tighten that sales motion. We can tighten that strategy much more, but that's already tighter than B2B, right? And so
Right.
now our motivation is, let's start to identify ICPs. LeFi I named as one of our customers, so maybe we can actually like double down on that ICP. Or maybe there's another one in the funnel which is a little bit more pure, and that's how we get more maturity. And then I think that's kind of what I've been waiting for this entire time. Like, I get most excited when I see clarity. I don't necessarily like the guesswork as much, though it is fun because you're kind of just playing. Like, I used this analogy the other day. It's like when I first joined, we were playing pin the tail on the donkey in the dark. It was like pitch black, and that's how you're supposed to play it. But now I think we have like a 1 watt light bulb somewhere, or maybe like a 10 watt, and it's like in the other corner of the room, but we're still playing on the right side. Much easier to play in pitch black, but still, I would appreciate like a floodlight, right? And so eventually, once the ICP gets probably discovered and we can validate that, and we actually get conversion from like a marketing generated lead, well, that is, I think, when the game is potentially on, because all I need is some signal that this is the customer profile that is really the right one to double, triple down on. And then that's when you have all of the marketing that you've been prepping the entire time. It's now ready to fire, because that's what we were doing the entire time. And so all that means is we have full confidence in that goal, or that target, and we can just run much more aggressively, and then put on like pull the levers like paid, pull the levers like even just paid broadly, I guess, even like earn media more aggressively. Like, maybe we need to do more media pitching, or more like product marketing that gets placed in earned media, just so we can actually push more through that funnel. And so I think we're just around there, actually, like kind of not pivoting, but turning towards that part of the marketing stack. And
Mhm.
that's taken 2 years, like you said. And I think that's a reasonable timeline. Like, I've had companies where that's taken, a year maybe, to some degree, but 1 to 2 years I feel like is pretty good. And so long as you're getting progress in startups, I think that's a pretty good sign. And so I think that's where we're at now.
Yeah. So shifting now to the stablecoin narratives, obviously stablecoins and that narrative is one of the hottest themes in crypto today, if not the hottest theme. Almost a year ago now is when the Genius Act was passed. Some of the biggest growth stories are, Circle, uh, Coinbase. You see the headlines every single day of the stuff that they're doing with stable coins. They just bought native markets rights for
Mhm.
USDH on Hyperliquid. There's a ton of news coming out of Stripe and what they're doing with Tempo. And so like all of these headline stories seem to be stablecoin, stablecoin, stablecoin narrative. How is that giving a tailwind to your day-to-day work and what you guys are building at Eco?
I think it's like the classic hype cycle that crypto or emerging tech sees all the time, right? Like
Mhm.
in when I was at Aeroswap, this exact question could be reframed to how is the tailwind of DeFi like changing your day to day? I actually think it's good, obviously, but also bad. And I
Mhm.
think not enough people talk about the bad until it gets like super manic, I think. And that's the classic, like I hear it all the time. It's like I laugh honestly, and it's like, like so you're in the bull market. It's like, I wish we were in the bear market. It's just so much easier to build. And I'm like, yeah, I get what you mean, but like, I don't think anyone wishes to be in the bear market. And like, I
Yeah.
get what people are trying to say, but my pushback on that is you should be building like you're in the bear market in the bull market, and you're going to have a great time. But if you build in the bull market like it's a bull market, well, the champagne problems are going to disappear for the short term, but the champagne's going to disappear in the mid and long term, at least inevitably in that cyclical flow. So, I think sometimes, like, now we're not like super, super crazy, but like stable coins are getting crazier. I think I've just been through enough cycles to not get super distracted by that. It's good, but I'm not like leaning into it super hard at all. And so I'm just focusing on what we have conviction on, what we need to be doing. I'm still playing a conservative bet, just like 2 years ago, because the stats are still proving that it's working. So if it wasn't working, then maybe I have to get more aggressive in certain ways. I think the other big opportunity is because the upper funnel is naturally getting more populated with a lot of people. I think the marketer that can figure out how to tell that stablecoin story to that new entrant, the person that just entered to the industry, is going to take the lion's share of the mind share, right? The
Mhm.
initial mind share. And so that's actually what I've been focusing on a lot, is because I think most people don't know how to react to that, and that inbound demand or just like industry demand. It's extremely hard to put your finger on. Like if you asked, hey, who are the new entrants in stablecoins? Like most people, even myself, will probably say, "Hey, it's probably the bankers, it's probably the institutions, it's probably like those people." But there's plenty more than that we're discounting. And so what does that exactly mean for someone like Eco? Well, let's get smarter on, of course, what we care about, which is conversion to keep the business alive, but also let's also figure out how to appeal to those people. And it's not going to be the crypto Twitter content. I promise you, it's not going to be that. Like, even if it's not the bankers who are a little bit more tight, it's going to be like someone who actually uses stablecoins for their livelihood. And some of the, the noise that happens in crypto Twitter, although very, very entertaining, is just like, it's like inside jokes that we care about that no one else in the world cares about. And so we got to figure out a different way to market that. And I think some people uh, or some companies overshoot that by oversimplifying the challenge at hand, which is how do we, like SBF actually famously did this, but it's like, how do we market to the masses at the upper funnel? Well, we'll just use venues that are seen by the most people in the world. And that logic means that we're going to acquire the most people in the world. Well, the world is quite large, right? The world is quite large, and not everybody in the world is ready for crypto or stablecoins just yet. Not even close. Internet penetration is not even like 100%, not even close. Like much better than before, but if we're not obviously like talking to the people without internet necessarily, but you never know, right? So the point is like there's a maturity level that is totally different across the board. And so when you do pick the brand marketing, even someone like FTX who had an insane budget, you cannot cover the entire field. And so the decisions that you make are very, very critical. And I think what I remembered, and I don't know the stats, but I remembered, like, I think SBF himself said this. I think he was like quite shocked at how marketing didn't actually lift as much as he thought it would. I remember there was this out of home campaign with his face on it, and it was like something a little cheeky, but it was like, it was like the Are You In campaign, I think, or something like that. And it's like, I get that campaign. It's actually a pretty smart campaign, but unless you really care about crypto, you're not in. Like, that's just like
Yeah.
a Ponzi, which is kind of
Yeah.
what it became, I guess. But I think you have to be very surgical still at that higher level. So that's why you're seeing like, sports sponsorships that get clawed back because they realize, guess what? The person that likes the Timberwolves in the middle of nowhere America, I don't think is ready to deposit their tokens into a
Right.
DeFi vault, like
Right.
realistically,
Yeah.
right? Or like use FTX even, which is like an exchange, but still a pretty advanced product to actually understand. And so, same example, that person who's at the Timberwolves game in the middle of in America is probably not ready for that. And so that's just like a total waste of money. So those are some of like the thoughts that I have on how to actually better scale that, but also like figure out how, like, these are the ways I think about some of the opportunities that our industry gets in front of us sometimes, and how I actually evaluate how to like go through with that or not.
Yeah. A lot of that excitement, I would say, though, is really like around the apps and the assets, specifically for retail users. I know
Yeah.
you said your core audience is B2B institutions, so this maybe isn't as applicable, but even like the all the excitement being about the apps and assets, you guys at Eco are an infrastructure company. So how are you positioning your narrative to own the stablecoin narrative when you are the underlying infrastructure versus being a more consumer facing app or asset?
Yeah. So even though we're not like immediately prioritizing the consumer and retail side or the consumer side, I think most companies in this day and age, even if you're like pure to B2B, and especially if you're scaling and you're trying to scale to a much bigger level, probably benefits from consumers understanding your product a little bit.
Mhm.
Unless, of course, you're like super, super niche where it doesn't really matter. But I think in crypto, especially, there is an investment component of it. And so I think that is like something that people should know, in my opinion. But that being said, I think the main thing that we try and do to get the stablecoin mindshare is really being intentional about our storytelling and our brand strategy. So our brand strategy has kind of been more or less unchanged since we started, but like with minor tweaks. This idea that we are going to enable more for you when it comes to stablecoins. It's not just going to be a vanilla asset. It's going to enable more, like that kind of like motif. Now, what
Okay.
we've launched, I think it was like 3, 4 months ago, we launched like a brand campaign, but a little bit like, yeah, I guess it's technically a brand campaign. So it's like a brand campaign called The Stablecoin Economy Grows with Eco. And that was kind of like the moniker. And the idea was that you cannot have a robust stablecoin economy without infrastructure. So it's like kind of this cheeky way to comment on that a little bit. It's like the Visa strategy, right? Like
Yeah.
or MasterCard or all these payment rails. Like at the end of the day, that is infrastructure as well. But what
Yeah.
do they sell? They sell, hey, you can actually like enable your hopes and dreams because you can actually pay with our credit card network or pay using it. And so for us, we were thinking, well, to your exact point, no, most people aren't going to directly use us, but they're going to need to know that we are enabling the thing that they want.
Right.
And if they know that, well, then they might not necessarily be able to pinpoint that we are an orchestration network that's enabling programmability like that detailed, but they will at least know, oh, you guys are doing something in stablecoins, or better yet, oh, you're building infrastructure for stablecoins. And I
Uh-huh.
think that's what we've been testing actually with a lot of our outbound motions and our just friends and family conversations within our networks. And when I first joined, it was like, oh, you guys are doing that like fintech app. And that honestly doesn't happen that much anymore. And I mean, happens here and there, but it doesn't happen as much. And
Right.
that's, of course, because the brand strategy has been in place and instructing people, and also the marketing's been in place. I think the first year it was like, oh, you're doing something with stablecoins. And now it's more like, oh, I know what you guys are doing. I think you guys are like settling stablecoins. You guys are doing cross chain transfers. Aren't you that intense protocol? Like they're actually being a little bit deeper with how to identify what eco is. And that's a great, albeit anecdotal, but very good way to validate the direction. And I think the most efficient way to do it is probably get some survey or some way to like measure en masse. But for now, I think that's okay. And so I think that's like the trickiest part. But that's the same thing, luckily, that Avalanche was dealing with. Most people don't use Avalanche per se. They use the applications on
Right.
Avalanche.
Right.
And so I don't think if I redid some of the campaigns at Avalanche, I would have done it a little bit differently. But I remember the brand strategy for a very long time was create without limits, and that was very more like very much like a B2B dev focused brand strategy. And this idea that we just wanted to have a really robust supply of applications. And I kind of remember obsessively studying how Apple did their app kind of like go to market motions, and they were very much just over investing on developers. And same thing with Microsoft was doing a similar thing. Like you have the Steve Ballmer meme, like developers, developers, developers. That gave me some obvious, but also like not so obvious insight where I was like, okay, well, yeah, chicken or the egg. Let's just like tackle one side of that problem first while also appealing to the masses by then remixing that create without limits a little bit, then goes like use Web3 applications without limits, use DeFi applications without limits. And so you can now see how that scaled horizontally across the customer segments beyond B2B too.
Yeah. Let's talk briefly about agentic payments. I know Eco has built a solution set specifically for agentic payments. AI and crypto, probably the biggest intersection of those two areas is, I would say, agentic payments. How are you thinking about positioning your guys' solution set to capture that mind share and to build awareness around your offering? And what does that even look like in maybe a market that the consumer is still trying to figure out what an agentic payments looks like? How do I have
Yeah.
my AI agent go out and do all these transactions on my behalf?
Yes. So we've been building this product. It's not out yet, but we've been building this function or this feature or this capability for the last year or so. And so for the last year, we've had dozens and dozens of private conversations with potential ICPs who would maybe want to use this. And so, of course, this is like the product discovery, product adjustment, PMF kind of finding
Mhm.
phase. Uh, That's what we've been through. We're like very close to finalizing and pushing it out, which I'm really excited for. So that's kind of like a big unlock for my world, which is I can now have another piece to market. I have another product to market. When you ask me like what are we thinking about when it comes to use case? Well, we have some bets on who might use it and who's shown the most interest in it. Then I have to do the thing that I've always done, which I did when I first joined Eco, when I first joined Avalanche, when I first joined whatever company I've been a part of. I need to be obsessive about the customer. I need to be
Mhm.
obsessive about the customer and understand their behaviors is the most important part. If I know the customer better than anybody else, well, then I'm going to be able to market to them much more easily because the marketing execution and generation of ideas is like not actually the hard part, at least for me anymore, because I've done the motion so many times. It's actually connecting the dots from marketing to the customer and then converting. And so we haven't really gone through this fully yet, but we are kind of going through it now. And I have to imagine it's going to be the same way we've done everything. It's what is the value proposition that people most care most about, and what is the thing that this product enables that hopefully can be emotionally tied to that customer back. And so for agentic commerce and payments and programmability of the agentic commerce, it's hey, well, these like very, very, very bare bones. These agents are also going to inevitably use payments. When that happens, well, guess what? Uh, T+3 settlement, T+2 settlement is not going to cut it. You're going to have not only context windows that max out, but you're going to have settlement windows that max out. And that just then makes the agent totally useless,
Yeah.
right? And so I'm not talking about like, hey, like, hey, Claude, can you pay my bills? Like, that's probably going to work fine. But it's more, hey, Claude, can you actually, I run a massive business. I run with like hundreds of thousands of customers. Can you pay everybody and check the rule sets of what their payment info is and make sure that you follow those rules and do that, make no mistakes, right? That's the meme. And when you do that, now you're going to need to be an HF, like high frequency trading kind of capability world. And guess what? That infrastructure doesn't quite exist yet. A lot of people are trying to build at it. And I think everyone's seeing that direction, uh, but not. And I don't think anyone's really taken that because the market segment doesn't exist as much. So I think the most important part of what we're doing is just simply being there. So then we can actually validate the product or not and make sure that we're adjusting that strategy as we go.
So let's close out on AI enabled marketing and AI powered marketing. You mentioned a lot about Claude and how you're using it, but what's like the one use case or workflow that you've built out that if it went away tomorrow, you would actually be like, oh, I missed this. I need this back. Not something that's like sexy or sounds impressive, but something that's actually very useful as a marketer.
Yeah. I think it's the idea that you could also make your marketing flows like programmatic per se. and yeah, programmable too, I suppose, like kind of overlap there. But and so like one flow is I have an SEO flow that generates content based on the analytics that it feeds in the back end. And effectively it has Ahrefs, it has Google Search Console, it has Bing Webmaster Tools, all the data feeds it needs. And so now instead of playing that pin the tail on the donkey in the dark in this case, it has a huge, huge light bulb shining exactly on what's a key opportunity or not. And so this app that I've created, it knows what is the least competitive keyword. It then uses a prompt that I've perfected over a year now that's pretty good. It then creates the content and then it publishes to the CMS, which is, we use Intercom, and then it ranks on the front page of Google, usually in a few days. That, I don't know. Like sometimes I get afraid that I shouldn't expose that I'm doing this, but also I'm like, you know what, whatever. I'm pretty confident in it. But that I could never do when I was manually doing it. Why? Because I'd have to write all these articles. The testing and iterating phase was not really done at scale. So
Yeah.
to get even past that, you couldn't get super sharp on that strategy. And it was always like, okay, not really good. Now I can have Claude just test a bunch of different concepts. We can publish them all. We can see what does well and what doesn't. And then it learns from itself. And that's what's the coolest part. And I don't have an engineering background. I'm not technical. I don't know how to code. And so this is like the most obvious, but I'm just blown away that I could even build this. This is
Yeah.
like insane. And all I've done is speak English to it.
Yeah.
And so that's just one example. That's search, right? Like search is the least sexy thing in marketing. I think no one cares about it. It's like the last thing they think about. And so I've now gone across and just now try to triage every other channel. Some are easier to figure out, some are harder. But so far, I've basically figured out social in the same way. We have a content generation app that generates X copy for Rob and also myself sometimes to use as a jumping off point. And it's very, very sharp. It ingests all of our strategy documentation. But not only that, it scrapes the X feed. And if it suggests, so this is a flow, if it suggests, it's kind of like the SEO flow. If it suggests a copy for you to use and you post it on X, it knows that it used your suggestion and then it'll observe that test. And it goes, wow, it did 10,000 views. Why did it do that? We might think that it's because we did a one sentence here, two sentences here, three sentences here, and this structure A, B, and C. Let's test that again. Let's do that again. Run that out, post another one, and it does 10,000 views. 10,000 views again, again, again. After the sixth, seventh time, it's going to, and probably even the second time, to be honest, but it'll figure out, wow, this system really works. How can we make it sharper? We know this template works, so we should never leave this from our shelf. This is part of our toolkit. And then now we can diversify all these types of posts using a very tried and true method that is unique to us. It's not this like industry-wide best practices, which is also in there, of course. But I tend to find the biggest challenge with marketing is everyone, successes doesn't necessarily, like success stories doesn't mean that the success story is going to land in your case.
Right.
And so I think some people take it off the shelf and don't make the adjustment. And now with AI, I think the AI can just make the adjustments much faster and you can, again, test and iterate that hypothesis much quicker too.
Yeah. Fascinating. Love it. So to close out, if a marketer were to come to you in the digital asset space, they're new to the space, what's one piece of advice that you would give them? And what would you not tell them about marketing in this space?
So you're saying a digital assets marketer? Like what would I
Yeah,
tell them?
someone's just getting into this industry
Cool.
in marketing, maybe their first job, and it's
Yeah.
at a company in crypto.
I would tell them there's two. So the main thing I always say, I've said this since I started, and I think I said this because I practiced it and then eventually preached it, I guess. But I think you need to know two things. One is depth in your marketing category. So if you're a specialist, like an SEO specialist or a social media specialist, like know that better than anybody else. And then the next thing is the job's not done. You need to know your category plus
Mhm.
one, plus two around you and know that better than anybody else. If you know those two things, you will be unstoppable. I firmly believe that. You might not figure out what strategy works off the first time or the second time or the third time, but you'll figure it out because now you're a foremost expert on those two things and you need to merge those two things together. What I wouldn't tell, I don't know if I would have like that many things I wouldn't tell per se, but maybe I'll kind of switch it a little bit on its head, but like similar answer or like similar kind of framing is I would say don't listen to what people say when it comes to over overarching statements, like broad statements from marketers.
Yeah.
Even me, I think. Like one of the thing like I hear a few things and one that comes to mind is it's like or maybe it's not from marketers. Maybe it's actually from non-marketers. So maybe it's don't listen to broad sweeping statements about marketing from non-marketers, I think is a tighter way to phrase it.
Yeah.
I hear from non-marketers all the time this one phrase, developers don't like to be marketed to. Yeah. Okay. That doesn't necessarily mean they're immune to marketing, right? Like that's two
Mhm,
separate belief systems.
mhm,
And it's also like, more of a cheeky kind of like kind of digging into that statement. I'm thinking like, yeah, but who likes to be marketed to? I don't think most humans who are very proficient in computers and in internet like to be marketed to. But at the end of the day, we're human beings who are trained to, you know, live in a cave and like hunt for food. Like we weren't built for this world. And so as much as we like to say that we're above marketing, it's just our monkey brain just assuming all these things and absorbing all these things, and that's how we get marketed to. So
mhm.
like that to me, I use as a challenge and I try to market to devs as best as possible. And I use paid ads for devs too. Like, and people are like, "Whoa, paid ads don't work." It's like they certainly do, I promise you. And so I think that's like some of the color on that statement is like, do not do that. And just like if you're the marketing professional, you probably are the subject matter expert. You know this category better. Like it might not work better than, marketing to a different cohort, but that doesn't mean it doesn't work. So I think you should just try anyways. And if it's not worth the squeeze, that's a different problem, but that's an ROI problem, not the fact that like it's one or zero and it's not working at all.
Awesome. Great. Jay, this has been so much fun. Really appreciate having you on here.
Yeah. Thanks, Tyler. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. All right. See you guys.